computer. Okay, so now we are recording. So
cool.
Yeah, the idea is basically to walk through not the whole QA framework, but to the last test that I wrote, which then you can have a feeling of like how we structure our tests.
Yeah.
And we can also touch into specific parts of the framework, like how we deal with what we call resources and how we implement page objects as well.
Cool.
So let me start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the last test that I wrote, which was merged last week. And it's basically a very simple end-to-end test to test one of the enterprise features of the plan stage, which is exporting issues, the issues list as a CSV. We are not testing the content of the file in this specific test, just the functionality from the perspective in the browser.
Okay, so you'd be doing something like pressing a button that says export to CSV, verifying that that button exists and triggers a file download or something.
Yeah,
okay.
Basically expecting that the right message is shown in the end.
Yep.
Which is not ideal. Ideally, we should be testing the content of the file as well, but I would prefer to analyze the test coverage in lower levels for this specific part, because if it's already covered in lower level tests, we don't need to write complex end-to-end tests for that. So yeah, basically, like all our tests live in the module QA, and then we describe in the context the stage in the DevOps lifecycle, so plan, and then we describe the feature that we are going to test, which in this case is issues list. And then in here, we already can see that we use what we call resources. So resources, like if we think about like design patterns, I would say they are more similar to like factories, basically. So we can fabricate different kind of resources, and the resources can be projects, groups, issues, labels, anything that you can create on GitLab through even users. Yeah.
Cool.
So many things that we can do through the graphical user interface, but that we can also do through the public APIs, and in some cases even through the command line with like Git commands. So in here, for example, we have this method called fabricate via API that fabricates a project, and we give a name to the project. In this specific case, for creating issues, I need a project beforehand so that this project can have issues. So this is why I need that in the beginning.
Do you mind if I just jump in with questions at any time, or do you?
Yeah, for sure. Please do that.
I remember looking it up, but I don't remember what the difference is now. But fabricate via API with the exclamation point is different than it is without it, and I've forgotten what the difference is.
Yeah, actually, this is like Ruby specifics, not really about the framework.
Okay.
And I'm not a Ruby expert, but I think, but what I remember is, or what I recall is that when it ends with an exclamation mark, it touches the, I think the class itself, and when it's not, it's the object, but I might be wrong, so I would prefer to.
Okay, yeah, I'll try and find it.
To look into it, yeah.
I'll try and find the answer again.
Yeah, so moving on, then this is something that then we use like before for the preconditions of the test when it's not related to what we want to test. So like, for example, I want to sign in first, I want to create some issues in the beginning, and I want to visit the specific page so that I can test that specific thing. One thing that it's worth mentioning in here is that, I don't know if it's still an issue, but I think it is. We have an issue which is just like we take screenshots of the tasks when they fail, but there is an issue that if it fails in the before hook or in an after hook or a before all or after all hook, screenshots are not taken. So we try to avoid using that, and we try to use that for very for very stable functionalities in the test framework, I would say. So like logging in is very stable, and like creating things through the API that doesn't touch the UI, it's more reliable than things that go through the graphical user interface. So then we can do things inside the before block. So in here, this is something very new that was implemented by Mark, because in many different files, we had to call 2 different lines for signing in, which is visiting the page and then signing in with the credentials. With this, we can now reuse the same code in many parts of the framework. And there is also a method called signing as admin, I think, or as administrator, something like that, that we can reuse.
Cool.
Yeah, then this is like Ruby stuff. I am basically using the Fabricate via API method of the issues resource to fabricate 2 different issues. And to fabricate them with different titles, I'm using this secure random library. Then with the project that I had here, I can visit the project, which will basically go through that project URL. And then we have a page object menu from the project page, which has this method click issues, which will basically from the menu navigate to the issues list. And then the task itself, which is basically we describe what we are going to test. It successfully exports the issues list as a CSV. And then I use methods from the page objects to interact with the page. So like we have index page for issues that are inside projects. And then this is something that is probably going to change. I remember seeing an issue from Dan where he wants to move more into the lines of having actions instead of like, instead of having like click export as CSV, we could have like a method that would be more descriptive, like export CSV issues list as a CSV, something like that. Same here. And then we have like, I like to do the expectations in a more, how could I call it? In a more scoped way. In some tasks, you see that we expect the page to have something. And then in this case, when the task fails, it looks, if we are looking for content like this, it's difficult to identify what has changed because it will get the DOM of the whole page. So I prefer to scope it better. So like here, I'm scoping to a specific element in the page to run my assertion. And then if something goes wrong, the error is easier to debug.
Yeah.
So this is a good recommendation, I would say. And this is basically it for this simple test. And then we can look into some things like for example, the project resource. So let me, so we have this QA directory, and inside the QA directories, we have another QA directory, which might be a bit weird, but this is where the end-to-end tests live. And then we have specs. This is where the tests live. And then we have features, browser, UI for everything that is community edition related, EE, browser
listed
UI.
By stage, it looks like, right? Yeah.
Exactly, by stage. And the same for enterprise edition functionalities. Then outside of specs, we have many different stuff like the resources and the page objects. I won't touch in everything like support tools and everything. I would prefer to start simple, and then in another meeting we can maybe explore other parts, or someone else could explore other parts as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So in the resources, let's see, we have the project resource. And the project resource basically expose many attributes, and it has this fabricate. It fabricates a group, because we test when we fabricate a project, we fabricate the group for the project to live in. Let me see. And here is like the fabricate method. We have the fabricate method, and in some cases, and this is fabricating a project through
the UI, it looks like.
The UI, so it uses the page objects to do that. And then we have a fabricate via API, which does it through the public API.
Right.
But if you call fabricate simply in the test file, it will see if is there a fabricate via API, it will use it first. If not, it will fall back to the fabricate method.
Okay.
And then when you define a fabricate via API, you have also to define the API get path, which is the path that the endpoint in the API. You have to define the API post body, which basically is the body that you have to send to as a request. When making the request to that endpoint, you have to pass some data in the body. So here we pass the name, the description, visibility, and other attributes. And those are like the things that we are using in that specific file.
Okay.
Let me look into a different one that I have implemented that has some other stuff. So this is for fabricating labels. And we initialize like some attributes with already some default values. And in here, we have like the API get, which in this case, there is no implementation in the public APIs to retrieve a specific label. It's just for the list of labels. So we raise an error in this case, but we overwrite the API post path with the post path defined in the public API, and here we define the post body as well. So if you don't pass anything, it will use the default one for the object. If not, it will use what you provide. And then we can move to page objects. Well, one thing to mention as well is that we have the resources in here, but we have this EE directory. And in here, we also have page objects, and we also have resources that are specific for Enterprise Edition features. But in the tests, usually what we do is we call the main file, like the one that is in core, because let me see if I can find one. For I think not for resources. Let me check. Yeah, not for resources. For resources, we call them from the specific directory, but for page objects, let me show you. Let me see, for example, project issues. Yeah, for example, in here, in the issues show page objects, we have this line in the end, which prepend if there is an EE page object as well. So you can call directly as you were calling the one that's not in the EE directory, because everything that is in there will be prepended in this file here. Does it make sense?
No. No, it doesn't.
Okay. So let me try to first, let me see if I can find something. Oops, it's back. Browser. Let's see if I can find one that is specific to EE. Page. Yeah, so for example, relate issue. This is a method that is defined in the issue page object of the project module inside E. But relating issues is a functionality that is only available for Enterprise Edition. So let's see where we use this in the tests. Search in here, related issues. Okay, yeah. So in here, I am calling page project issue show, which is like the page module, project module, issue module, show page. And in here, I say show dot related issue. But actually, if we look into the structure in here, this relate issue method is actually not on page project, it's in EE page. But since we prepend in this one, the one on EE, it becomes available in here as well. This is what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, let's look into. It gets difficult to look into the files that are open when I am sharing the screen. But yeah, there are two page objects that we are using here that I think are worth looking into. One of them is the menu, and the other one is this one here. And I think it's worth looking into them both because they have kind of different implementations. So let's look into the menu first.
Sure.
So if we go to page project menu.rb, it is quite a short file, which has only these three different methods: click merge requests, click wiki, and click activity. Basically, it will click in the sidebar in these links. But the difference is that it includes many other submodules here that are submenus. In the past, this file was a very long file. And one of my first contributions to the framework was actually refactoring it, because I used to use like this concept of components that compose a specific page that can be reused. And this is basically what we have done here. So if we go to project, there is also a submenus.
Yeah.
And in here, we have very small files that implement the specific functionalities for these submenus, and then we can reuse them, and we can leave the menu file like a shorter and cleaner. So this is it about the menus. And this one here, so let's go to page project issues index. This is more like a simpler one. Well, one thing that I haven't mentioned in the other one, but it's the same in here, is so we have the elements that are available in this page, and we have the methods that we can interact with this page. The elements, they are defined in this structure here. We have we defined this view block here, which passes as an argument the file where this element is defined. So if we search, for example, for this file here, and we look for assignee link, we have in the view file where this view is defined, like where it's implemented itself, we define like a data QA selector attribute. which we use in the page object. So we don't define the selector itself in the page objects. We define the selector in the view, which can be, in this case, is an RB file, which can be also a HAML file, which can be a view component file. So depending on which file it is, the implementation might be different. Like if it's in a Vue.js file, it will be more like a real attribute in the specific element in that component. In RB files, we have to define it this way. But basically, the main point of doing this way is that we have something that we call, I think it's selector check or something like that, that runs when we create a Mars, which means that if you have defined a page object, an element in a page object, but it's not defined in the view, it will break the build, right? Because there is an incompatibility.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It adds some complexity, but it saves us from not updating the selector in both places.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So let's go back to, let me close this directory. Yeah, so we have the, and we have page objects for EE, as I mentioned before, and for the core features. When we have for the EE, so let's go first to the non-EE, because then you can see the difference. In here, in the class, we define the views directly. But when it's inside EE, we use this module eval to basically have this inside. It's the same as to have them all available in the first page object and not having to call the EE module itself. In the past, we didn't have this data QA selector attributes in the page. We used to have classes starting with QA dash and then the name of the element. As this is deprecated, and we are now moving from this to the data QA selectors. But in cases where we are not following the convention yet, you will see this Rubocop
exception. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we have the methods, which this is what has to change, like, because the method is basically the same as the method name is almost the same as what it does instead of being like more an action. So this is something that has to change. But yeah, then we have like basic implementations that use the DSL that was written on top of Capybara. So like click element is defined. This is actually important for you to know. So on page, not in the EE, but on this one, we have this base page, which defines like various kind of methods that can be reused by many other page objects.
Right.
Like refresh. And this is where we will find, for example, like click element that was used there. It's basically an abstraction on top of Capybara's implementation. So it's find element and page. Find element is Capybara implementation.
Okay.
And basically we use Capybara find element dot click, but we call it click element for like readability purposes. So this is an important file to look into if you are confused, because it implements many of the basic functionalities of our page objects.
Yep.
And yeah, that's, so for example, click issues is a method from some of the sub-menus in the menu module. Click export as CSV is available in that page object that I just showed you. Which is this one here, which uses the base click element method. And we have like waits to wait for something to happen before continue and things like that. And yeah, I think I touched everything that I wanted, which was like the structure, this issue that we have with the before block, the fabrication of methods. We prefer to fabricate things through the API when we don't. Faster. Yeah, because it's faster and it's a lot more reliable as well. And then we go to the point when doing the tests.
So can I ask, so for the first automation task that they're kind of asking me to do, I would expect that I would write these tests exclusively against the API. So I don't think I'm going to be using any of the UI for the first set of tests I'm going to write here. Is that common? Are there examples of tests against just the API?
Inside specs, we have features, and then we have, besides browser UI, we have API tests as well that are also separated by stages.
Yeah.
And in here, you will probably find lots of examples of testing things directly through the API.
Okay. Because when I was looking through this the first time, I was only looking at the browser UI. I didn't realize that the API folder had tests dedicated to just testing the API. That makes total sense now that you pointed out.
Yeah, we have that. And let me check. We also have, if I'm not wrong, outside of the QA in specs here, or is it in here? Not sure if it's in here or if it's in specs here. Yeah, we have like things related to APIs in here. So this is not very clear exactly for me, like, but these are the API tasks that are written by the development team. And those are the ones developed by the quality department, or not developed by, but maintained by the quality department.
Sure.
So I would really try to understand in which directory it should live this kind of test that you're going to write, if they should live inside the QA directory or inside the specs directory outside of the QA.
Okay. I will make a note to ask.
Do you have any other question? I will stop sharing for now.
I do, but not directly related to what you're presenting at the moment.
Okay, so do you mind if I stop recording then?
Oh yeah, that's fine.